What is this?
It's Steve Sager, darling.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
He came back for another visit.
Hello, Steve. Was machst du?
Good. Steve
I'm
and
glad.
Steve, a couple of Steves on the screen now.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think, Jenna? Are we good?
Yeah, let's do it. You just let me know when you want me to put this on the screen.
Yeah, I'll let you know in a minute. This session is the final one in a sequence where we'll be talking about Torah from Sinai. Who gets Torah from Sinai? Poets' views on what it means to receive the Torah from Sinai, to hear your parents receive the Torah from Sinai, a man and a woman who hear their fathers receiving Torah from Sinai, a woman who refuses to go to the mountain but takes the time from herself and somehow still receives Torah from Sinai, the search that brought Moses to Sinai that had really nothing to do with the epic story of Sinai at all. You'll remember it was really a very personal search, at which point we spent some time thinking about what it means to transform the public and the epic search that we all share into the search that each of us has in a unique way, to deepen the Torah into a personal search. So for 5 weeks, we've been thinking in one way or another about Torah and the giving of Torah from Sinai. And each time we do it, we tamp down this word Torah into a deeper place in our vocabulary. It should mean, it might mean to you, it means to me more and more as I scratch and sniff the word. It has a valence that it didn't have before and before, or before, or before, or before that even. No matter how many times I read these pieces, no matter how many times I think about it or how many angles there are from which I view Torah, La Torah shiv'im panim, said the sages. Torah has 70 faces, 70 facets. And when you look at Torah, yeah, each one of them looks like, or excuse me, Torah looks like it's looking right back at you, said one ancient sage who clearly had the Greek statues of his day in mind. Those statues who still had eyes in their sockets, who were famously understood to be looking at you wherever you were in the room, Mona Lisa-like. And the Midrash says that when God says on Sinai, I am the Lord your God, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, and speaks in the second person singular, that it really means that each person, we're to understand it, that each person hears it in the second person singular. Clearly there's a huge, huge crowd, and clearly it is meant as a public address in the largest order that the sages were capable of framing. But everybody in a unique and personal and intimate way got a face and a face and a face and an understanding of Torah. So this is some of the language, some of the myth, some of the imagery that sponsors our imagination and prompts our imagination. And we're going to bring it to a close this evening. And after the holidays are over, we'll start with another project, talking about doors and doorways and transitions, moving from here to there. What is liminal space like? More about that perhaps at the very end, but that will be not just poetry, but midrash and other pieces of ancient and also modern imagination. And I hope it will prompt artists of various kinds, media artists of various sorts, paint and fiber and clay and whatever, to create works of art that somehow capture one piece, one idea, perhaps musicians, but one idea of transition, of morphing, of moving from one space to another that may help us to see things a little bit differently. But more about that, again, at the end. For right now, you have in front of you two pieces that symbolize this transition. A piece of Midrash, or a piece of 18th century rabbinic thought, really, in the words of the great Hasidic master Levi Yitzchak, the Rebbe of Berdichev, on the one hand, and the 20th century, 21st century master Rivka Miriam. So these two we will bring together, and the title on the page that has the Berdichever's paragraph is a title that's taken from the very first line. For Torah will come forth from me. I wonder, thank you, Jenna. You picked up on that cue so beautifully. Can we see the English of that prose page bigger?
Wow, too big. That's good.
Is that good? Okay. Okay. That'll work if it's just a tad higher, I think. Ah, perfect. You're the best. For a Torah will come forth from me. Ki Torah me'iti tetzeh. A Torah will come forth from me. This one of the 13 principles of faith that we recite, Maimonides' 13 principles of faith. I believe with complete faith that this Torah will not be changed, nor will there be another Torah given by the Creator. May his name be blessed. The fundamental truth is that without doubt, this Torah will never be replaced. As we say, I believe with complete faith that the entire Torah in our possession was given to Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him. But given the promise that in the future a Torah will come forth from me, we can reason why it is forbidden to tamper with even a single letter of the Torah given to us. And the matter is this way, that even the white space of the Torah constitutes letters, but we do not know how to read those letters as we do the black letters. But in the time to come, God, be he blessed, will finally reveal the Torah written in the white spaces, meaning that all of Israel will understand the white letters of our Torah that had been given to Moses. But now, those letters of the white spaces are hidden from us. And this teaching of the Berdichever Rebbe captured in the notebooks, thank heavens, of his students, and framed in a work called Imrei Tzadikim. Well, it's an image with which you might be familiar, especially if you've been listening to me teach for a while, or a longer while, or the longest while possible, because it's an image that has been with me for a very long time. And when I finally decided to track it down, relying on my memory that it was a teaching of the Berdichever and a teaching of his students, I remembered the book in which I read it, and I pulled it off my shelf right over there, and I found it with my underlinings from 1971.
Oh,
And
nice.
I looked up the footnote. And back in those days, I didn't have the book, or I didn't have any of these volumes, really, these holy works. But this one, Imrei Tzadikim, is beyond my skill set enough and beyond my my interests enough that I didn't have that either. But you know, these days everything is online, so you can find it. And I found it, and I translated it so that we could look at it together. But the idea of the Torah of the white spaces is something that has been very important to me for a long time. I wonder what it's come to mean to you, or what it means to you. What does the image do for you?
It sounds like we're still all writing our own Torah in our white spaces.
It makes
It
me
opens
curious
up all
that you might
sorts of
say.
possibilities.
Say it again.
It opens up all sorts of possibilities.
All sorts of possibilities, all sorts of
Period.
possibilities of meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for the things that are sometimes hard to understand or upsetting or difficult, it holds out the hope that it is eventually going to be possible to make sense of them, to square them once these white spaces are revealed.
Right. It allows for an open-ended future for a Torah that we don't understand. If I understand you correctly, that's a nice way of saying it. All of the possibilities that that we might imagine.
What occurs to me is from a very different trope, which is Miles Davis, who talks about the space in between notes. And the music is importantly played in the space in between the notes as it is in the notes.
Thank you. I can always rely on you to cite the classics.
I hope you mean that with okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely I do. Music, its temporality frames space on one side and the other. And there are Coltrane's sheets of music, as it were, that rain down, but still in all, anybody who wants to play the saxophone like St. John Coltrane of the church named for him, anybody who wants to do that needs to get his breathing markings right. Otherwise, you have somehow corrupted the text. Never mind that your breath is not up to it or that your lungs are not up to it. You might make some other kinds of decisions about how you want to play that music based upon your capacity, but it's all towards the end of ultimately understanding more of it. And finally, that aha moment of getting it, because you might be able to play it at least a phrase or two the way he did, and perhaps understand it the way he did. It brings me to punctuation, really, which is another interesting part of the toolkit for interpreting Torah, isn't it? Where do you put the period? How do you put the emphasis? Where do you accent? Is there sarcasm in the Torah? Is there humor in the Torah? Does it all sound like some kind of Anglican priest, after all, or some very, very formal presentation from a very high bima? What do we do with trope markings that turn one sentence into the next, that look like or sound like they're off the rack? Are we being fair? Are we, perhaps, as one of my teachers once said to me, you're preserving the Torah the way everybody is used to hearing it. I mean, you're preserving a Torah for everybody, not the Torah for each individual.
Another possibility, I think, is what was received at Sinai. There's written Torah that Moses wrote down for everyone in his generation. There's oral Torah that Moses passed down through a particular line of descendants. And then there's mystical Torah, which was given, but is received in every generation anew when we can look at the Torah. And in a sense, we have the opportunity to walk in the footsteps of Moses and bring it down ourselves.
Okay, that could bring us back to any one of a number of poems. In fact, to all of the poems. Jenna, I think we lost the sizing when you lost the screen there. We lost the screen for a moment, but maybe we could get it back again. Yeah, it's very close. Needs to go over a little. Okay, a little higher, a little higher, a little higher. Yes, thank you. Thank you again. Yes, it brings us back to all of the poems. Isn't that what each poet claims the right to do? This is my story. It's also our story. And that mine and everybody's idea of Torah, David, and others also who have talked about the multiple possibilities and the single text, or implied the single text, I think are onto something extremely powerful and important here that stands at the center of a tradition that has at its center a sacred text. The text has to be a text that is everyone's text and a text that is each person's text. At least it is with that we struggle. So every poet with whom we have had any interaction has given us the story. And even if, like Yehuda Amichai once or twice has played with the story and tested us against the story itself, saying, for example, that Moses built a golden calf, when he began his poem by saying, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, which put him in the circle of rabbinic creators of these midrash texts. And he knew darn well that Moses didn't build a golden calf, and he knows that we know that Moses didn't build a golden calf. So there must be something else going on here that we're supposed to learn. And certainly Chava Pinchas Cohen understands that according to the Torah, everyone went to the base of Sinai, men and women together. And she says, not me, not me. And she also plays in a very important way against what the Torah has actually told us. So we have this extraordinary phenomenon, this community building and maintaining phenomenon of a basic language of religious imagination and its images. It's our imagination and the Torah's images that allow our Torah to unfold.
So, Steve, I would go back to what I was saying about that we can write our Torah in the white spaces. So I'm one of these people, if you give me a blank piece of paper and say, draw something, I would just go crazy. I mean, that's just too big a responsibility. But if you put something on the paper and I can, or a sculpture and start it, and I can shape it from something that's already given, then I can add my own features to it, or draw my own lines, or erase some lines, or build on it. And it feels like that's what we're doing here, where we have this Torah, we have these white spaces, and then we have these poets and the teachers and the rabbis that all sort of continue to sculpt at it and maybe fill in some of those white spaces for us, but probably we still have plenty of white spaces for ourselves to fill in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We still have enough white spaces to fill in. And I wonder what Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev has in mind when he thinks about a time when we will understand all of the white spaces. I wonder whether this is a pro forma Torah, or a Torah that he gives that's based on faith, a teaching that he gives that's based on faith, while he's gritting his, while in some ways he's gritting his teeth and saying, God, I hope this doesn't happen, at least not while I'm alive.
Yeah.
I really
Steve,
yeah.
sorry. I just noticed something different in this text. I guess I've always understood it as, you know, this white space that we write in, but I'm reading it now and it feels like these letters are already there. They're already written. That it isn't, what I'm reading in right now is that it's not an invitation to write your own Torah, but an invitation to see those letters in a language that is hidden from us. And that I was thinking about, how are we taught to read? What do we need to know? What has to be agreed upon so that we look at the same word, at the same marks on a page, and that we agree upon the meaning? And just thinking, you know, it's a different way of looking at it, rather than us writing it in there. How do we create that language together or understand it?
I had the same feeling that Rachel did, that it is a language that we don't know.
Yeah.
But we need to figure out how to learn that language. And I don't know how one learns it, and I don't know where one goes to learn it, but it's there. It's just that we don't know how to reach it.
Yeah, I was thinking
Yeah.
it's a language of absence, of places without the pigment.
Nice,
I don't know.
nice.
I was thinking something probably completely opposite, that it's like the marginalia, and maybe even literally the folks who are on the margins, whose stories aren't in the text. When our Chumash ends in a chaf, with a chaf sofit and a kamat, or is it a patach, then it's a single male. But where are the women? And then, the rest of us write in, me too, me too. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, yeah. What are the rules that govern grammar and govern syntax? Are they immutable rules? Are they rules that we get to set aside in order to understand Torah? The truth is, it's for another time, but I could give you a bunch of examples where that is exactly the case. And if I could give you a handful of examples, then I'm sure other people could give you many more examples of how it is that grammar and syntax, which help govern us and guide us through the text, can certainly be set aside. Stacy, it looked like I saw your hand waving.
I has been thinking about this as balance. I think that there's a balance to how we breathe, how we read, how we interpret, and with mindfulness, you need to pause. You need the white space to be able to actually understand the other letters. And when you have that kind of balance and that give and take between the white space and the letters, it's not like a literal letter, but it's more figurative to make us fill in to help us fill in those places so that we are present when we are reading the black letters.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's right. There are parts that makes sense to me. There are parts of the Torah that we can't understand without some kind of oral tradition accompanying them, without some kind of fill-in, and we can't find them in the black spaces. So we have to find them someplace else. What does it mean that? And some of those questions are easier to raise than other questions. For example, an easy question to raise is Joseph thrown into the pit by his brothers, a well-known story in film and stage and book and song. Joseph thrown into the pit by his brothers, who is mute throughout the experience, or so we think. That's what Genesis chronicles for us at that point in its story. But later on, when the brothers are talking and they don't know that Joseph understands them as they are unwittingly fulfilling his dream, the brothers say, this is because when he cried out to us, we didn't respond. So there, the Torah has actually given us a strategically told story, a story with strategic variation. It told us the story one time where Joseph didn't do anything, and it's the story another time where Joseph, in fact, did something and invites us or demands of us even. Sometimes it seems to me, Rashi would say it like this, the Torah says, darsheni, interpret me. I would say the Torah says, grab me by the lapels. You need to grab me by the lapels and shake me, and don't let me go until I give you a blessing. So there are those kinds of stories that the Torah makes easier. That Torah makes easier to ask if you have a mind that inquires. Then there are more difficult texts. Avoni gadol minaso, says Cain to God, after it is it has been made clear that he has killed his brother Abel. My sin is too great to bear. My sin is too great to bear, says Cain to Abel, except, as one of the rabbis says, perhaps he's saying, no, is my sin too great to bear? Because the Hebrew would have just exactly the same words, just with different nuances. But never mind the particulars. If your Hebrew grammar is good enough, you'll know what the grammatical issues are here. But it's very interesting. Here's one interpreter who wants to say, really, for you, it's too great. This is too great a sin to bear. How could that be? Isn't forgiveness endless after all? And now we're in a whole different situation, and in the presence of a Cain character who is perhaps impudent, brazen, or at least bold. So fill it up. As long as the Berditchever is saying, as long as Levi Yitzchak is saying, sorry that I sometimes call him the Berditchever, the Rebbe of Berditchev, and sometimes call him Levi Yitzchak. I don't mean to throw anybody off. But when Levi Yitzchak says, this is why the placement of every single letter is important in the Torah, it's because we do have to have a Torah that everybody can look at and know what to find exactly where we find it. And also the space needs to remain, the white spaces that are accompanied, informed, encircled by that encircle or accompany or inform the black spaces have to remain intact. They have to remain the same spaces. Everybody's got to have the same text to work with.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody. Let me read it. Let me just read it again and let it be a way of drawing us back to the text and maybe seeing something new in it. For a Torah will come forth from me. Vikashe, and the difficulty is, isn't this one of the 13 principles of faith that we recite with Maimonides? Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. I believe with perfect faith. Shezot HaTorah. Do you hear it? Shezot HaTorah. What do we say when we pick up the Torah? Vezot HaTorah. And everybody's pointing at it. And why is everybody pointing at it? Well, it's a custom. It's in place in some synagogues and not in other synagogues. It's that one. It's right there. I'm not mistaking it. I'm not talking about those few letters on the wall, which are really a Yisker, a yahrzeit inscription from some pious person who dedicated a lot of money to the shul. That's not the Torah. This is the Torah, this thing that I'm pointing at right here. Shezot HaTorah lo tihiyeh muchlefet. It will not be exchanged for another one. V'lo tihiyeh Torah acheret me'et haboreh. There will be no other Torah given by the Creator. May his name be blessed. The fundamental truth is that without doubt, the Torah will never be replaced. As we say, I believe with complete faith that the entire Torah in our possession was given to Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him. But given the promise that in the future, like the prophet says, and he's messing this all up, or he's gichon peh to investigate me, we can reason why it is forbidden to tamper with even a single letter of the Torah given to us. If you tamper with even a single letter of the Torah that's given to us, then you change the shape of the white spaces and the possible realities of the people who are not who are with us but are not us, or not me, or not you. The matter is this way, that even the white space of the Torah constitutes letters, but we do not know how to read those letters as we do the black letters. But in the time to come, God, be he blessed, will finally reveal the Torah written in the white spaces, meaning that all of Israel will understand the white letters of our Torah that have been given to Moses, that had been given to Moses. In other words, we've had it all along. We just didn't know how to read it. But now those letters of the white spaces are hidden from us right now. Well, this is a teaching that speaks Torah language. God will reveal. And what does it mean to say God will reveal the meaning of the white spaces, rather than saying that you will reveal the meaning of the white spaces? Well, this is the from language. This is the holy language that Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev speaks when he gives his teaching. But we understand very well the personal nature of it.
Rabbi, two people have raised their hand virtually. Richard Cody.
Oh, good.
What is a moment a while back, Richard?
Hi, good evening.
Okay. You gotta just shout, because I don't know. I get too confused by all the stuff on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, Richard, sorry.
Yes, no worries. Beautiful. I mean, this recalls, taking it more literally in the text, this recalls more of a mystical quality about we don't have the capacity to perceive it yet. It's a perception issue. And at some point, whether it's messianic or, we'll be able to, oh, wow, this was there all along. And bring back to mind the midrash about how are the tablets inscribed, the black fire and white fire. I mean, this is just being able to read the white letters that are always there, but right now we're not the level we can even recognize them. But someday it'll be clear as day.
Someday, yes. And I like to think that the implication here, at least certainly for me, the implication is it's through my experience and my hard work and my imagination that it becomes clear, not because it's a stroke out of heaven, although it might feel like that. It might descend upon me or you, but it's really a product of a lot of inner working. I remember one time when that actually happened to me. I've been very interested for a long time in the category of fear, and what it means to be afraid, and where fear comes from, and so on. And one time, in reading a story well familiar to me, when Adam was hiding from God in the garden, and God said, "Where are you?" And he said, I'm hiding because I'm naked and afraid. And God says, "Who told you you were afraid?" And one day it occurred to me that God might have said, who told you you were naked? That God might have said, who told you you were afraid? I mean, both of them, let's say, an embarrassment about being unclothed and fear might not be features of life in the Garden of Eden. What would it have been like if God had said, who told you you were afraid? Have you been eating from the tree of life? After all, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Who told you you were afraid? You shouldn't know about that. So that occurred to me, and is it in the text? Well, it's in the white spaces, or it's in my white spaces. So yeah, thanks for that. I think it's a lot of hard work on our part, or maybe it's not even conscious. We're not even conscious that it's hard work, but it means investing ourselves in the text. I feel just a little bit sermonic, but I'll indulge myself.
Is that what Isaiah means? That because it's the prophet Isaiah, and he talks about the me, the ani, or me.
Yeah.
And is that putting the responsibility on each one of us to explore and to delve into the white spaces?
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't even think about that when I wrote out this translation. And I clearly, I mean, it's not a hard sentence to translate, and I'm sure everybody's translated it the same way. So only a few words, and there's not that much you could do. But in terms of punctuation, I could have made a capital M. And probably I should have, because that's the way Levi Yitzchak is taking it, that the me is God. But maybe the me is Isaiah, really. And maybe we've been turning him into too pious a character. That this is the individual search and quest, after all. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks
Also,
for that.
Rabbi
Yes.
Jane.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I had a
Jane?
question. Hi, yeah. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a question about that, where it says this is a difficulty. Now I don't know the original word in Hebrew, but does it say this is a difficulty because God is saying, I'm going to give you something, it's going to look like it's a contradiction, but bear with me. Does the Torah understand how we're going to think? Does God does he anticipate? What is that? Why is that there? This is a difficulty.
Yeah, and you probably do know the word akasha. It's the same in Yiddish. It's akasha. It's the, in other words, kasha is a question, and also it's something that's hard or something that's difficult. And it's difficult because God's already given us the Torah, which is fundamentally, foundationally, irrefutably the only Torah. And now he says there'll be a new one. There'll be another Torah coming. And so the Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev has thousands of Hasidim who all know that everybody who gives a teaching is giving in some ways a new Torah, but he's still playing with this because there's an idea behind what he wants to say that he really wants to get at, which is how does meaning unfold and how is it rooted in the sacred text? Debbie, I thought I saw your hand waving around there.
I'm thinking of a lot of different things, but the white spaces are the water that the black letters are floating on, and they're there because the words in the Torah they're constant and unchanged, but they're malleable. And the white spaces let those letters float around in terms of what they mean, and that's what we have to figure out. What exactly does it mean? And it's I sort of see it as an amoeba, just sort of changes, but it doesn't change. And we have to figure out we have to figure out and understand, and that's where all of the white, and that's what the white space is for.
Yes, absolutely. And if you know the science of or have some understanding of the hydraulics, then you get moved from place to place a little bit easier, or more swiftly, perhaps. Phyllis, I see that you raised your hand.
John.
Yeah, it's actually John.
Oh, John.
But, so it's interesting. I have two reflections on this. One is that one of the things that in astronomy and astrophysics that they've learned recently is how much of the universe is made up of what's called dark matter. It's sort of the reverse of the white and the black, but the stars have all this light, but what we're learning is that a great deal of the matter of the universe is invisible and unknowable and can't really be seen. But in order to make everything work in terms of masses and gravitation, there's this dark matter that you just can't see. So I think in a lot of religious contexts, there's a sense that the rules are knowable, that what's expected of us is knowable. And what I think Judaism provides more, and this really indicates, is that as much as you think you might know, there's a lot more that is not only that you don't know, but is not even knowable. And I think I could be off on this, that within Christianity, there's kind of, the Bible is there, it's knowable, it's the drash is there's a focus on the literal meaning. And I think what we're presented with in studying this is not only is the literal meaning not that evident, but there's tons that's not knowable at all by us, that's part of reality. And it gives us, I think, a much more humility-filled view of the universe that's being presented to us.
Well, thank you. Yeah, let me say just something about that. There is a feature, and then we're going to move on to Rivka Miriam's poem for a little bit. There is a feature of Christianity that is evident in a kind of ancient interpretive form that's called pesher. Not perush, but pesher. And the pesher draws more of a one-to-one connection. Like, this means exactly that. This corresponds to that. This, yeah, that's more of a feature of early Christianity than it is of early Judaism, as I understand it. So as much as Christianity might be filled with a kind of open-endedness that keeps us agape and in wonderment, there is this other feature that stands out that, at least in the ancient world, was much more apocalyptic. You know, this stands for that, and with much more certainty. So yeah, that seems like that's got some legs to it. How about Rivka's poem, Jenna, if you're still waving your magic wand? A page, and the next one.
You want the Hebrew?
No.
Is that right?
And I think it's the page to the side of it. You have
I blew
next
it.
to each other. There you go. Ooh.
Oh, my. Hold on. Coming back for you. I had to do the classic close it and reopen it. I think that'll work.
I see. I'm only pretending to understand when I say I see.
Just turn it off and blow in it and turn it back on.
I don't understand at all. I can say PDF, but I have no idea what it stands for. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And here's how she opens. One day the Torah will leave us and move on, and we, as accustomed to her as to our own bodies or to the landscape, that even when she turns from us, she always comes back to and fro, like one of our parents or a child that we've born. Suddenly, we won't know whether to stop chasing or to pursue. We won't know whether a part of us has been taken. A lung, let's say, or blood, or heart, or the mystical Torah lights, the hidden light, the direct light, the encompassing light, or surrounding light. Or perhaps Torah was just a childhood garment we've discarded, like the shirt that a growing child replaces. Or perhaps Torah is not a garment per se, but a veil, or a scarf, or a curtain pulled back, or the ancient fig leaf passed from the first generation to the last, or memory itself, born before time, that moves between spirit and flesh. Just so, someday, we will be left without the Torah, and no one among us will know if he's still alive. And each will look into the other's eye, searching for Sinai. There's some lines of that poem that I'd give anything to have written. I'd retire.
That's an extraordinary poem.
All the various lights that she mentions, these are all terms of the Kabbalah, terms of Jewish mysticism. The Torah lights, the hidden light, the direct light, the encompassing light, the surrounding light. They're all features of divine presence and enlightenment that come to us in different ways and from different angles and perhaps for different purposes and so on. But starting after that, she's got me, and I wish I was her. Or perhaps Torah was just a childhood garment we've discarded, like the shirt that a growing child replaces. Or perhaps Torah is not a garment per se, but a veil or a scarf or a curtain pulled back, or the ancient fig leaf passed from the first generation to the last, or memory itself, born before time, that moves between spirit and flesh. And I put her in conversation with Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. These two great masters deserve to be able to talk to each other.
And also with the Amichai poem that we read a few weeks ago, where the children of Israel were literally left with the Torah. God, you forgot it, come back. Or they started looking to give it back. And here we are left without it.
Yeah. Is it a sad moment? What do you think? If you have your hand raised, just shout out, or Jenna will tell me, perhaps. One day the Torah will leave us and move on. And we, as accustomed to her as to our own bodies or to the landscape, that even when she turns from us, she always comes back to and fro, like one of our parents or a child that we've born. Suddenly we won't know whether to stop chasing or to pursue. Yes, Jane. Jane. Yeah. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. The parent in the flesh, the parents disappear, but they're still with us. So the Torah, whether it's here or not, is still the Torah and is still here. And all of these things, the veil, the scarf, the fig leaf, the curtain, these are all things that can be maybe seen through, hide things, but the things that they hide are still there. So there shouldn't be a question. No one among us will know if it's still alive. It's there. We just can't see it.
Okay.
Like the white spaces, like the white letters.
Okay, fair enough. So you would have her crossing swords, crossing pens a little bit with Levi Yitzchak or Berdichev, perhaps. But beyond that, you raise a very interesting question that is at the heart of one of our upcoming rituals. Have you noticed? I'm sure you've noticed that every time there's a Yizkor, that the Torah is taken out of the ark.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is Ritzifut Hadorot. This is the bringing together of all of the generations. This is the collectivity, let's say, of all of those Torahs, of everybody's attempt to fill in the white spaces and having the exact same white spaces and knowing exactly where they are, because of the same in our Torahs as they were for theirs, and so on. So it is no accident, and it's no modern flourish that the Torah is taken from the ark when it comes to Yizkor. That kind of solidarity. What else? Yeah, Debbie.
Why does she call the Torah her in the first lines and he in the last?
Yep.
I don't know where you are.
Okay, one day the Torah will leave us and move on, and we, as accustomed to her,
Oh, I see.
our own bodies, even when she turns from us, and then just so someday we will be left without the Torah, and no one among us will know if he's still alive.
I think I understood the he there as being the individual who's looking, and I was just using conventional, thing there, but conventional grammar there. But yeah, it's an interesting question, and certainly Torah is a feminine noun. So feminine form. So seemed right, we don't have that much airtime or video time for such expression of gender. So why not use it when we can?
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. No.
What else we got? Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, well, kind of drawing from the traditionalist idea that each generation gets further away from Sinai, that, I mean, even if it's a necessary development, perhaps for human advancement, there's still this sense of sadness and loss, and the urge to keep on looking and to try and get back what you've lost.
Yeah, that's right. And here she might be calling into question the urge to look. We don't know whether to stop chasing or to pursue. Is this now farfallen, we don't even bother to pursue it anymore. It's not, what does it mean? What would it mean to have Torah that's not in the range of discourse anymore? That Torah, she says it in effect, and Levi Yitzchak of Raditchev would never say such a thing. That Torah might be so outmoded that it's just gone. And it's not, she doesn't say that we've left it, but rather that it has left us, which is an interesting way of accomplishing her end. What do you think, Adina?
Rivka Miriam represents she is among those who have behave as secular people. Their lifestyle is such that they're not keeping of the tradition on a day-to-day basis. She belongs, if we see the dichotomy, she belongs to the non-religious group, which is absurd, and it's very simplistic. But there are people in Israel more than here who do not see themselves connected to Torah in the way that Levi Yitzchak says, or in that we're talking here. And that pull and push between being attracted and pursuing the Torah and feeling that the Torah doesn't speak to us anymore. Maybe it's in the white spaces that we don't know, but the black that we see does not attract us. The black that we see doesn't speak to us. And I wonder where that fits into that, because there is that voice, the voice that, yes, we know it exists, but it's gone too far away from us.
I think it's fair to say, and I didn't leave time to do any more than tease us about this, and to risk Adina being annoyed with me for saying something too nice about her, but she's one of the world's leading experts on the phenomenon of secular congregations and secular prayer in Israel, and what it means to what's the impulse. If you take away the theological foundation from traditional study and you make it a foundation that's based on renewing society and pares all of this down to the good, to societal good, how frum does that make you? Does that make you is it its own kind of orthodoxy or whatever? And there are a lot of those congregations, aren't there? There are a lot of those projects that you are in touch with.
It's
Certainly.
interesting. I never thought about that, but they're exploring the white spaces more than the black ones. It's too simplistic to say that. It's not true, but there is something about it.
Well, that's one of the teasing and wonderful things about both the Berditchever Rebbe, Levi Yitzchak, and also Rivka Miriam, is that it's too simplistic, and it's also not.
Of course.
Yeah, both for both of them, too simplistic and also not. And at the very end, what does she want to say after she has pulled this back, pared this back as much as she can? Not only us and our lives or our garments or our accoutrements, our accessories, but the ancient fig leaf and that which is older than memory itself, that's born before time, Torah before time, that moves between spirit and flesh. It just keeps shuttling back and forth and you can't put your finger on it. Then she takes us a little bit farther back and a little bit farther forward. Just so someday we will be left without the Torah, and no one among us will know if he's still alive. And each of us will look into the other's eye, searching for Sinai. What a line. We'll be looking into each of us will be looking for Sinai. How do you know when you've seen Sinai? What do you think of her ending line? Just to overstay my hospitality for a few minutes, and we can chat about that. What do you think? What do you recognize?
I think we could view that last line. Could each of us mean us in Torah? Israel on one hand and Torah on the other will look into the other's eye, and both search for the lost Sinai. And the poem as a whole could be viewed as referring to like Israel and Torah as an old married couple who have kept each growing, but now in different directions. And they separate. Both are enlightened and bruised by the encounter, but both are still searching for Sinai.
Yeah, and will somehow recognize it.
Which is the marriage ceremony, the origin.
Eva, I want to go back to the juxtaposition of these two pieces together with the veil and the scarf or the curtain pulled back, that this is the white spaces that either we are trying to fill in, or as Rachel and others have said, they're there, but we can't see them. And it's like this veil is covering them and we're trying to pull it back, discover what's underneath. We can't really see it, but we sort of know it's there. I love that idea of that scarf, that veil, that sort of cloudy presence that, or the curtain that you're pulling it back. You're going to see a little bit. It's it's there, but you don't really know what's underneath. Really like that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Wondering, is this kind of like a mystical set of training wheels? Like it's someday, again, maybe like messianic, we won't need it anymore because we'll have arrived, and we will each other be able to say we can see Sinai in each other. Thank you for guiding us here. Now we're here.
That's a very lovely possibility. Thus far, it seemed like the Torah has stalked off in a snit, but no, maybe not. Maybe Torah says, no, my work is done here now, and I don't need to do any more. That's certainly another way. And I can tell you this, knowing the poet even as well as I know her, which isn't all that well, she wouldn't give an answer. She would never tell us. But thank you for that. It's a nice note with which to leave the screen. And I will just come back to everybody for a moment. And let me remind you that this is the end of a sequence of a consideration of Torah, the giving of Torah, the receiving of Torah, the imagining of Torah in ourselves and of ourselves and from ourselves, our past and also future, consolidating a particular text with very eccentric and unusual personal interests images that are ancient and imagination that is both formed by the ancient and goes to the unique and the exotic and the personal, and all somehow still has to fit in because that's the language that we share. And when we begin again, it will be with another subject that I did lay out, a subject that has to do with transitions and doorways and thresholds and transitions of all different kinds, of which those things are symbolic. The door is important because it is the thing and it is also not the thing. It is where the meta meets the fore. The meta and the fore are hinged right there in the opening of the doorway. And that's what we're going to explore. It has its basis in Jewish law and in legend and in poetry and in the most extraordinary turns of imagination that are unrivaled even in our time. But more about that another time. Let me just tell you now that in terms of the theme of this poem and this intersection, this conversation between Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev and Rivka Miriam of Jerusalem, that there is something about some substance of the Dvar Torah that I am planning to give at Bethel on the second day of the holiday, which will be about the language of the shofar. And the images of that language, the imagination of that language, and imagining perhaps something that is different with the same vocabulary and the same tonal structure, and yet somehow different because of the times within which we live. We desperately need it to be different, and we also need it to be the same because, after all, we're all anchored in the same way. And it is no accident that, well, we only have it from tradition, the truth is, that is to say from oral tradition, not even the oral tradition that's written down. It's not even in the Mishnah that's finally written down, but from a somewhat later generation where Rabbi Abahu says to us, when you blow the shofar, you have to start with tekiah. Don't ask me why. He won't tell you, but you have to start with tekiah. And I mention it because tekiah means rooted. It means fixed. It means firm. If you don't have a language that is a language of solidarity, then those other things that are broken or shaky don't make any sense because they have no context. And it's that kind of theme and the meaning of the language that I would like to explore, and maybe thinking out loud a little bit about what that means for us in our time. And I feel very much freed by the possibility of speaking about things that I want to know rather than about things that I know. It's much more freeing, and it's much in some ways easier to talk not about what you know, because you don't have to be an authority. All you have to do is have a question. So I will be taking the easy way out, and that's the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the only shofar blowing day. It's kind of a commercial message, but I have no idea about what time it is or anything like that. You'd have to get that from the Bethel website. And
around 11 o'clock.
I see. Okay, thank you.
But I want to put in a commercial message also that thank you, Jenna, for hosting these and for recording them. And we have now put all the recordings of the poetry sessions, except for the last one and this one, on our Sicha website. So you can go back if you either missed one of the sessions or want to go back and see it again. We posted it there. Hopefully they'll all be there soon. Thank you, Jenna. And we'll continue to do that as we move forward. We wish you all a Shana Tova, a good year, a happy year, healthy year for all of us. And I know Steve greatly appreciates everybody joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, Yasher Koach.
Tova.
Shana
Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Shana Tova.